Okay, I'm going to share here thoughts that I've certainly been developing over a number of years now, but link it, I hope, very directly into certainly some of the closing remarks of the film. First, I think we have to stop putting so much store in terms of how we take forward change in elaborate, often I think rather phony forums and policy processes. I have voiced this in many occasions in a lot of different policy areas, but this is one. I mean, I think one of the great disappointments in a devolved Scotland, for instance, is that while we've got awful good at finessing words on pages, whether it be strategies or policies or indeed legislation, we ain't quite so hot in actually building the shared understanding and desire to build the kind of Scotland that we want to have for the future and to turn that into practical action. And where I want to make the link with some of the closing remarks in the film is what the chap at the end said about working with young people. One of the areas where we've had lots and lots of shiny documents and articulations on is about how we work to ensure that embedded within our education system is a growing understanding and awareness of science in general, and more done to recruit the next generation into areas like science and engineering. We talk about it a lot. We talk about how we need to be working more closely with business and industry for it to happen. There are all sorts of pebbles in the pond all over the place. I've been fortunate, I think that's the right word, to spend quite a bit of time in and around the energy sector over recent years as well. And I see fantastic things going on with some really, really bright and committed people, you know, working in areas like renewable energy and going out and working with young people, just as I see fantastic things going on in and around this university and others, you know, working with young people, but it's too fragmented, it's too disjointed. And frankly, if we could channel an awful lot more of our effort into practical, on-the-ground effort, particularly with our youngsters, rather than some of the talking shops that we create, then that I really genuinely believe could be transformational. And I was so pleased to hear a couple of the guys at the end make these kind of comments.
Andy, thanks, Susan.
Okay, first of all, I thought that was a really interesting climate scientist view, or scientist view of the climate scientist. And it goes to the heart of science being not a religion, it is simply rigorous interpretation of data. And boy, is there a lot of tedious data collection, yeah, which is, if done well, and it was being done well, gives you this phenomenal insight into the systems that we've got in our world. So I don't think there's any issue about the climate science, nor indeed about the physics, which we've known about for more than nearly 200 years. Actually, Fourier first made the point that planets with atmospheres were warmer than planets without. Tyndall came out and showed that there were particular atmospheric constituents. That was in the 1860s. And Arrhenius actually calculated the greenhouse effect. We're talking about stuff that's been known for a long time. I think that the bits that I didn't see in that film, which I think are really important, one of which is that in a complex system, understanding the basic physical principles about a complex system is not the same as being able to predict what will happen at a particular time and at a particular place in the future. And that matters, because actually what we want to know is, how is climate change going to affect us here, or us in New York, or us in the Philippines? And actually that's an incredibly difficult proposition for any scientist to tell you about. They can give you very broad ranges on the basis of physical principles, but actually saying what is going to happen in Scotland or in the UK is very hard. And that creates all sorts of problems in terms of trying to communicate, to come back to Alex's point and Stuart's point, about how you communicate some of these issues. Because what we've tended to see, as we saw 10 years ago, was, oh, it's, you know, we've had a run of warm, wet winters. Oh, this is what we're going to see. We're going to see lots of warm, wet winters in Scotland. Boy, the skiing industry's had it. That was 10 years ago. Yeah, we've now had 3 or 4 years of great skiing, lots of good snow. If you like skiing, you like snow. But what it tells you is not that climate change is wrong, or that people are wrong about climate change, but that actually the communication has tended to focus on science speak. So when they say about average climate, they talk about a 30-year running average. They don't talk about year-to-year variation, things like that. So I think there's a real problem with that. The other issue I just want to flag is the question about whether change is in itself bad. Question. it's not clear to me that all change is bad, and yet that's predicated, a lot of that film's predicated on the notion that change is bad. And a couple of comments at the end, one of which was a quote, "The natural world will not survive." The natural world will survive. It may survive in a way that we don't like. It may survive in a way that doesn't support us very well, but it will certainly survive. And again, this use of communication and how you communicate those sorts of complex issues, to me, is at the heart of the social changes that both Susan and Stuart have been talking about. So the science is straightforward. You know, it's a complicated system, but the science is straightforward. Communicating that to make it matter for people has been a real challenge. And if I'm going to be completely blunt, notwithstanding Alex's sort of communication role with the Met Office, scientists have been terrible at doing it over the last 20 years. They've done it really, really badly. And I think there are lots of better ways of doing it, and we need to be addressing those.
Okay, thanks, Andy. It's interesting that one of the inexorable laws of a seminar is that having said or asked people to be very succinct, the further you go along. And of course, the facilitator then ought not to put any comments in himself, but to be provocative. I wonder, so what came out of this for me was this. What is the question? Alex said, what is the problem? Lack of communication. Well, I wonder, what is the problem? What is the question? Is it that we don't understand the science? Or is it that we don't understand or accept the contribution that human activity is making to all of this, which was the point that Stuart was making? I'm not sure I took from that enough, certainly not in the first and only showing for me so far, to persuade me that there's much we can do about it as humans if we change our activity. So is the question, or is the concern and denial around about what, if anything, we can now do, given what we're presented with? So that's just to be provocative and to challenge us all. I'm not saying that that's my view, because facilitators don't have views. Let me open up. We've all had a little chance to say a few things. Can I ask you simply this, to identify who you are, because I'm sorry I won't necessarily recognise you, to be succinct, if you'd like to pose questions, or perhaps just to reflect a particular theme that comes out of this that adds some value and challenges us to think differently and challenge our own assumptions about things. So over to you, and I say that also to the folks who are not in this room, and I'm really sorry not to have said hello to you at the start, but somehow or other, if there are questions, perhaps they're all going to be texted, right? So they'll come in. Modern technology knows no bounds. Okay, I'll hand you over now to the floor. Please. Questions and observations. One. Yeah.
Angela Hull, Harriet Watt. It's a problem the predictive models, this kind of black box models that are not very transparent, nobody really tells us the assumptions, and we're not really clear what data goes into them. And that's something the film did not really discuss.
Okay, so are you pose that as a question, do you think that that may be a problem for our reception of the conclusions?
Yes, yeah, that's
okay.
what I'm suggesting, yeah.
Comments? I'm going to tell you what, let's take two or three, Stuart, shall we?
No.
There's somebody at the back with a hand up. Yes, please.
Well, most of us I'm Stephen Arrow from University of Edinburgh.
Yep.
Some of us are academics and they use a peer review system. How has, I'm saying you get good reviewers, you get bad reviewers, how has the criticisms of the public criticisms been a good reviewer, or has it helped the quality of science at all?
Right, so has this criticism of the science actually helped, or has it hindered, or is it a bit of both? And that's a very interesting question, because it may well be that even ill-informed criticism causes people to up their game and be better communicators. Good. Let's have one more, or even two more. Yes, David.
David Sigler from CPAC. I think the thing
You may need to, would you mind, because people may not hear you at the back, just standing and addressing your remarks to us all?
I think the thing I took out of the film was certainly the science issues, the oceanography are very, very interesting. A lot of our emphasis in Scotland has been focused on climate change mitigation, our 42% reduction.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the conclusions in the film made me recognise that our climate adaptation in Scotland is probably more pressing and equally important. Flooding and all the other changes, and the scientists all said this is going to keep on happening. We have to be thinking about our own local environment, as well as what we hope our 42% might do as an indicator for the world. It's globalism and in achievement in mitigation.